and I have been married 12 going on 13 years, and every now and then we get asked, do you guys ever fight? No, the answer is no. We have conversations of varying levels of intensity, but we don't fight. Now, there is a lesson that I learned early on in marriage, about 5 minutes into marriage, that you probably have learned. I hope you have learned this lesson if you've been married at least 5 minutes or longer. And the lesson is this, is that there can be two people that both want the same outcome or the same results, but that approach a problem from two very different perspectives. And so what happens is Brianna and I, there's an issue, there's a problem, there's something we need to solve. We both want the best for our marriage. We both want the best for our family, for our kids. We both want the same thing out of life and together. That's why God brought us together. But she and I can approach an issue, a problem, a conversation with two so very different perspectives. And the problem is that, I think that I'm right and she knows that she is. And I tell you that because whether it's your spouse or it's a coworker or an employee or a classmate or a teammate, it's easy to come at a conversation, a question, a problem, some issue going on at work or at school or with your HOA, and two people have two very different perspectives looking at the exact same thing. Let me illustrate it this way right here. And so I have before me, you probably can't see, but it is a quarter, all right? Now, if I hold this quarter up and I tell you guys to describe it and myself to describe this quarter for me. Some of you'd go, well, it's round. I'd go, yeah, it is round. You'd go, and it's silver in color. Yep, I agree, it's silver in color. And you guys would go, well, there's an eagle on there. I go, you're dead wrong. There is a picture of George Washington on there. And you'd go, no, Chris. I'm not sure if you got hit in the head, but that is most definitely a picture of an eagle. I go, listen, you guys are sweet, but I've got the microphone. That is a picture of George Washington. And you'd go, how do you know? And I go, well, I've never met the man, but, from other pictures that I've seen, this looks like George Washington. And you go, Chris, I'm quite confident that it is an eagle. Both looking at the exact same thing. We would agree on some things. Yeah, it's silver, and yes, it's round, but you think it's an eagle, and I think it's a picture of George Washington. The same is true in life. You can come at a problem or an issue or a thing at work from two very different perspectives, both looking at the exact same thing. And so what happens when you find yourself on opposite sides of the proverbial coin of life? Whether it's a spouse or a coworker or a neighbor or that random stranger where there's a problem, there's an issue, there's a topic at hand. I see it this way, you see it this way. We're both looking at the same thing from two very different perspectives. How in the world do we approach it when we're on the opposite sides of the coin? How do I see your perspective? How do you see my perspective? And then ultimately answering the question, why? If you got a Bible, go ahead and grab it. I need you to go to two places. I need you to go to John chapter 4. And I need you to go to Ephesians chapter 4. John chapter 4 and Ephesians chapter 4. And if you don't have a Bible, don't worry about it. It'll be up on the screens. We're going to start in John chapter 4. If you've grown up in church, you have heard this story probably 100 times. You've heard it preached probably 100 times. And it's the story of the woman at the well. And you owe it to yourself to go read the entire passage. But it is a phenomenal conversation between this lady and Jesus. And we're going to get to the very end of the conversation and just some aha moments, this then God moment she had in her life and how her perspective was changed. But let me just give you some of the high points of the conversation. Jesus goes to this well. He sends his disciples back in town to get some food. They run off to town to get some food. This lady comes to the well and Jesus goes, hey, can I get a drink? And then the conversation gets interesting and they cover every hot topic of the day. She brings up the fact, she goes, well, you're a Jew and I'm a Samaritan, you're a male and I'm a female. So she brings up those differences and she goes, honestly, we shouldn't be talking to each other. Then they have some more conversations and she asks Jesus, does he really know how a well works and does he understand the quality of water and really what that means? And then Jesus takes a left turn over here and brings up her reputation. and just makes mention that, hey, she's had 5 husbands, and the guy that she's living with now, they're not married. And then she steers the conversation back to religion. And she says, well, let me ask you this question. You Jews think you should worship in Jerusalem. We Samaritans think it should be on Mount Gerizim. What is it? And it's a beautiful conversation, and Jesus answers her questions with this perfect mix of both grace and truth, of both love and understanding, but truth and not condoning anything. It's this unbelievable conversation. But this lady at any time could have walked away, because she walks up, and the first thing that she knows is it's a strange Jewish male that she's talking to, and she could have easily walked away and says, I'm out. But she asks question after question. The conversation goes deeper and deeper and deeper. Finally, she gets to the topic of religion. This is where we'll pick it up, starting in verse 23, and Jesus is finishing up answering the question on religion, going, what really matters is not the place, but it's the heart of worship. Look at verse 23. This is Jesus speaking. He says, but the time is coming, indeed it's here now, when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. The Father is looking for those who will worship him that way, for God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and in truth. And he just gets to the heart of the matter, going, listen, it doesn't matter the place. What matters is the heart. And then there's this aha moment for her, verse 25. The woman said, I know the Messiah is coming, the one who is called Christ. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. And look at Jesus' words, verse 26. Then Jesus told her, I am the Messiah. And I would love to have seen her face at that moment. Right, because just moments earlier, it's some strange Jewish male that she's talking to and having this really weird conversation. And she wonders if he even knows how a well works. And then for some strange reason, he knows her reputation. And then some strange reason, he goes to the heart of worship, and then she goes, well, the Messiah will explain everything. And then Jesus says, I am the Messiah. And then look what happens. Verse 27. It says, just then his disciples came back, and they were shocked to find him talking to a woman. But look what it says. It says, but none of them had the nerve to ask, what do you want with her? Or why are you talking to her? The woman left her water jar beside the well and ran back to the village, telling everyone, come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could he possibly be the Messiah? So the people came streaming from the village to see him. And in this story, the woman and Jesus are on 2 opposite sides of the coin. And your next then God moment may be on the opposite side of the coin, the opposite perspective. And the woman at any point could have said, man, this is too weird, I'm out. But she has asked question after question, and the conversation goes deeper and deeper. But then when the disciples come back, they kind of wonder, why is Jesus talking to this Samaritan woman? It says, but none of them had the nerve to ask. Now, why they didn't ask, I'm not sure. But can you imagine the perspective that they would have gained if they would just simply ask Jesus, why? And in this story, you see Jesus in the middle. And yes, he's the Messiah, both the disciples and of this woman, but it's 2 very different perspectives. And the woman had the courage and the guts and the confidence to begin to ask questions, to begin to seek a different perspective. Then runs back to the town telling everyone, I found the Messiah. Now, here's what's interesting. It's the same village that the disciples were at buying food, but they didn't invite anyone to see Jesus. And that's kind of weird, like going to town to buy food. They're, like a typical dude, go get food. This is all I'm thinking about. I'm going to get food, right? And they're going to find the quickest drive-through that they can find and bring back food. The woman goes back, and she looks around. She knows her reputation, right? She knows that, but she goes back and she goes, could he possibly be the Messiah? And people begin coming out to see Jesus. And here's what I want you to grasp about perspective, is that perspective is like a muscle, in that it is gained when it is exercised. Perspective is like a muscle. It is gained when it's exercised. And in life, there's your perspective and a new perspective. There's a way you view a problem and a new way to view the problem. And your way, it's easy to exercise that because that's your natural ability, right? It's your perspective, and it just seems right. If If you didn't think it was right, you would change. But this is the way I view something, this is the way I view life, this is the way I view issues. And so I view it through my lens, and it's my perspective, but it's like a muscle in that it must be exercised. And so in order to look on the other side of the coin, that takes humility, that takes work, that takes sincere conversations. When you do your exercise of perspective, make sure it is a full body workout and not just your own. Proverbs chapter 18, verse 2, it says, "A fool has no interest in understanding. They only want to air their own opinions." Well, in other words, listen, my perspective, it works for me, it's right for me, and I'm digging in my heels, and that's it. But when you understand that what Jesus taught and what he modeled is to view life from different people's lenses and to step on the other side of the coin and go, what does it look like from your perspective? It's a muscle, and it's gained when it's exercised. Now, I'm naturally right-handed. I write right-handed, I throw right-handed, I kick a ball right-footed, I'm right-eye dominant. And how weird would it be if when I go to the gym, the only thing that I exercise is the right side of my body? Right, I go there and I work out my right calf and then my right quad and only my right abs and my right bicep and tricep and shoulder. And all of a sudden, my right side of my body is just sculpted beautifully and the left side looks like Gumby. Right? I mean, you would go, what? Well, that's so weird, Chris. Well, I'm naturally right-handed and right-footed, so it's just easier for me I'm stronger on my right side. Well, that's so foolish, and it's got to be equal. You got to work out both right and left, both the right hand and the left hand. Now, naturally, I'm still going to right-handed and throw a ball right-handed, but it becomes equal because I know my natural tendency is just the right side is stronger, so I've got to exercise and do a full body workout. Perspective is the exact same way. Well, this is the way I view a problem. This is the way I see a problem. It's my perspective, honey. I know my in-laws, your parents are like that, but this is the way and so I'm digging in my heels. And if you're married, you know how well that works. Or if you've got employees or coworkers or classmates, you know how well that works. All of a sudden, we dig in and go, this is my perspective, the way I see it, and I don't have the humility or the courage or the confidence to step on the other side of the coin and see it from your perspective. So the way you gain a different perspective is by exercising that muscle. It's asking the questions. It's taking a position of humility. It's doing the research. It's hanging out with people on the other side of the coin going, well, what does it look like from your viewpoint? And maybe you change your perspective, maybe you don't, but the whole point is to see it from that person's point of view, not to dig in and arrogantly say, this is it, my way is the right way or no way. And this woman is a beautiful example, and at any point, she could have just said, man, this is too weird, and, we really shouldn't be talking. And Jesus crosses all sorts of different cultural taboos of that day. He does it in grace and truth, and this woman begins to ask question after question after question. When the disciples come back, it says not even one of them had the nerve to ask. Perspective is like a muscle. It's gained when it's exercised. Now, why? Why should you and I begin to look at different perspectives? I look at the coin and I see George Washington. You look at the coin, you see the eagle. It's just way easier to go, well, this is what I see, and this is the way I've grown up, and this is just the way I view life. And so it's a picture of George Washington. And you're going to go, Chris, whatever you want to think, it's a picture of an eagle, and this is the way I see the problem, this is the way I view the problem, so it's just that way. Why in the world should we have the humility? Why in the world should we have the courage to step on the other side of the coin and view it? And I'll show you why in Ephesians chapter 4, and in so many different places, Romans, 1 Corinthians, Ephesians, Paul references the body of Christ. He references us as believers as coming together as one body, united under Christ. And in Ephesians 4, he goes through this idea of the body and its many different parts, but here's the whole point of the body working together in verse 16. Very simply, he says, he makes, meaning God, makes the whole body fit together perfectly. As each part does its own special work, it helps the other parts grow so that the whole body is healthy and growing and full of love. He makes the whole body fit together perfect. Each part does its own part, but it does it to build up the other parts. Doesn't work autonomously and just go, well, I'm an ear and I'm only going to be an ear. I'm only going to think about an ear. It has to look for the elbow. And it has to look for the hand and the knee and the foot. The body works together as one unit, unified under Jesus, the head of the church. And it's to do it to produce love. And so the reason you gain perspective is to win the other person, not to win the argument. To win the person, not to win the point. To win the person, not to win the fight. And so you know what? I may see George Washington's head, but man, I care for you deeply. And so I'm going to step on the other side of the coin and view it from your lens, from your perspective. And so we gain perspective. We exercise that stepping on the other side of the perspective, not to win the argument, not to prove our point, not to go, no, I'm right. It's to win the person. Because we're one body united in Christ, many different parts and many different functions, but coming together, working together to build each other up. You think about a body, and Paul uses this metaphor through different places. But if you think about the body, one body parts have very different perspectives. Would you agree with that? Depending on what body part it is, it has very different perspective. And probably the two opposite ends, as far as geographically located, is the ear and the foot. The ear has a very different perspective than the foot does. The ear is up high. It's getting fresh air every day. It's hearing beautiful music. It's hearing wonderful sounds. It's hearing birds chirping and waterfalls crashing. It's up there flying high and hear all sorts of beautiful things. The foot, on the other hand, it gets stuffed into a sock and then shoved into a stinky shoe and then laced up for 8 hours. And then finally, after it gets home, after a long day of being walked on for 8 hours, it finally has the shoe taken off and the sock taken off to get some fresh air. And just about the time the foot is enjoying life, it steps on a kid's toy and screams out in pain. And the foot says to the ear, you've got it so easy. You have it so easy, ear. You're flying high. You get to hear cool things. You don't know what it's like being a foot. And the ear goes, are you kidding me? Do you know what this body does that we're attached to? He's an attorney. Do you understand what I hear all day long? Do you understand the things I have to filter? Do you understand the hurtful things that are said to me? I have to hear things. You have no idea, foot, how hard it is being an ear. And the foot goes, are you kidding me? I'm stuffed into a dirty, nasty sock for 8 hours. And do you know what this attorney does for a hobby? Kickboxing. Kickboxing. He slams me into an object for 2 hours after work every day. Kickboxing. The foot is not meant to be boxed. It's get the hands involved in this conversation. No, leave the hands out of it. No, ear. You have no idea how difficult it is being a foot. And they argue back and forth. And if they would simply go, you know what? I can see what it's like being stuffed in a dirty, nasty shoe and kickboxing for a couple hours on end. You know what? I can now begin to understand what it's like to hear things that maybe you don't want to hear. And so it's this whole idea of not the ear trying to become a foot, not the foot trying to become an ear, but understanding what it's like and building each other up. And so we gain perspective, not just to win the argument, not just to make the point, not just to prove that we're right, but to win the person in love. And imagine this moment with this lady. I mean, everything that she knew said that this conversation was not going to go well. Everything in culture and everything around her just says, it's a Jewish man talking to a Samaritan woman with my reputation and my religion. This is not going to end well. But she has the courage to begin to ask, and Jesus answers with a perfect balance of grace and truth and goes, I am the Messiah. And that then God moment opened up for her on the other side perspective. And so I don't know whether it's your spouse or your coworker, your classmates, or your neighbor, or that random person. But your next then God moment, that moment where God says, this is your next thing, this is that aha moment, it may be on the other side of that perspective where you're digging your heels in. And what would happen if you said, you know what? It's time to do a full body workout on perspective. And to step on the other side of the coin and go, what does it look like from your viewpoint? So we're going to put that in practice. And I'm going to have some individuals come up here on stage. And I wanted to hear their perspective on things. And, come on out here. And so we're going to have a conversation with some individuals who, here, put that right there. Perfect. Awesome. And so here's what we're going to do. I've asked these individuals to come out here and just share their perspective on life and how they view it and what God has allowed in their life. And so they have a perspective of life. You're going to hear all four very different perspectives. And they've been, treated differently because of the way they view life. And so we're just going to have a conversation. And so this is what it looks like to exercise that muscle of perspective and go, you know what does it look like on the other side of the coin? So I'm just going to have them introduce themselves and just say what their perspective of life is. We'll start with Sean.
Well, I'm Sean, and I've been mistreated or just even misjudged just because of the color of my skin at times. Sometimes you walk into a place and you're immediately being sized up, or people see you for a past action that someone else who had they've mistreated or whatever may have happened. But sometimes, that's been the case for me and my family. And so it put me and Tamika in situations where we're having to have conversations with our kids to say, this is that person's perspective and why they're saying certain things to us. And but what we challenged ourselves to do as parents, make sure that we were the ones educating them and making sure that they were proud to be the color that they are and proud to be just simply who they are.
Awesome. Sassy.
Good morning. I'm Stacy, and I say that I've been mistreated or treated differently for being a female senior leader in a corporate environment. So every day at work became a competition and proving who I was and what I knew. So that's how I was treated different.
Good morning, I am Matt, and I have experienced mistreatment in my life because of the way that I speak. There's been times where I've walked into a fast food place, a store, and whatever, I'm talking, and you could tell that the people I'm talking to kind of have this puzzled look on their face, like, is this guy okay? Like, is he hurt? Is he sick? Like, what's going on? And they've treated me like a child, like I'm dumb at times too. And they just don't know, like, hey, there's nothing really wrong. It just takes me a little bit longer to speak or say a sentence, and that's okay.
And I'm
Yeah.
and I am Stacy K.
Yeah.
And I've been treated differently because folks don't see the perspective of, being part of a family that has a child with special needs. So those of you that don't know, we have a little boy named Noah. He's 10. He rocks an extra 21st chromosome, which means that he has Down syndrome. And, there are just a lot of instances where we just get, the stares, people, when they find out, when you're picking out which kid is yours, in the dance troupe or on the playing field, and they realize it's Noah, they're like, oh, okay, and they kind of back off.
Yeah.
So...
And here's what's interesting. There's four different perspectives. It's a small cross-section. I could have asked 100 of you to come up here on stage and give 100 different perspectives. But here's what I love about these men and women up on stage. First and foremost, I know them well. Not a single one of them have ever played the victim card. Not a single one of them have ever tapped me on the shoulder and going, hey, Chris, if ever I get a chance to get up on stage, I've got to get some things off my chest. Not a single one of them. In fact, I told them all this morning. They didn't know this. But when I asked them to come up here and talk and I asked them, have you been mistreated? Every single one of them individually, their first response was a smile. I go, hey, have you been mistreated? I knew their stories. And they smile and go, oh, yeah. And I go, you have? And they're like, oh, yeah. And so it's not this woe is me, victim card. It's just going, that's a part of life. And, people misunderstanding their perspective of life. And so just briefly tell us, maybe an instance where you've been at a place and someone either misjudged you or just didn't get what your perspective is.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let me tell you this story about this summer. So Noah and I were at a local pool, and Noah's 10. He knows he's 10, and there were some other kids there that were about his age, so he wants to jump in and play. And they're playing the game Marco Polo, if you all know that game, right? And I'm off on the sidelines, and I'm watching, and I start to notice that, wow, Noah's like Marco Polo all the time, right? So he's it all the time. And then also started to pick up that the kids were, kind of making some fun about how Noah talks. So, kind of typical with kids with Down syndrome, they don't always articulate really well, so he can be a little hard to understand. So, and this child was, was making fun. So, I think that was that was a tough moment. That hurt a lot to see that. And it was so blatant. The parents were hanging out right there by the side of the pool. And I did what every self-respecting mama bear would do, is I took to Facebook.
That's
right? So,
that's awesome.
and the thing is not because I was angry at the parents or the children. I was angry at myself. And I was angry at myself because that was an opportunity to help other people see my perspective and Noah's perspective, and I didn't jump on that. So it's just a story about
Matt?
There's a few things I could share, but something that I think is important is the perspective part. Is there's sometimes it gets brought about, do I talk, my speech, the stutter and everything, and in my culture, a stutter culture, we don't mind when we talk about it. We don't mind if there's a person who says, hey, what's that like? What does it feel like? But what really hurts is when people try to make it not a big deal. And it's not a big deal to me, but people just assume that it's an easy thing to go through. And people just assume, like, oh, you handle it well. I don't even hear it. I don't know. And I'm thinking, like, that's insensitive. Like, this is something I dealt with in the past, and it's not something I fixed, but I overcame. And when you say it's not a big deal, you make me feel like everything I've ever experienced, from the embarrassment, the shame, the mockery I have received, is just thrown out of the window. So the perspective is people just don't understand internally what goes on with it. I mean, it's a battle every time I walk into a grocery store with a person I don't know. If I don't know a person, it becomes more of a bigger deal. But if I know you guys, and I don't really care, make a big deal about it. But that's one thing I've experienced too, is people try to put themselves in shoes they can't fit. Which, when we engage culture, we can't think about us. We have to think about the culture we're engaging. And to me, and the culture that I am in, it's kind of a big deal. But we don't like to play a victim card, be like, hey, I'm unfortunate, woe is me, pity, some spare change, all that good jazz.
We pay you. We pay you. Matt gets paid, okay? We pay him, I promise.
It was just the first thing that came to my mind. But that's
good.
just what I have experienced
that's awesome.
time and time again.
That's awesome. Stacey, what about you?
So for me, I've been in the corporate world in a leadership role for about 30 years. I started when I was 5.
Yeah, that's right.
And, sorry.
That's awesome.
And one of the situations that helped kind of remind me of some of this was going into these big executive meetings, like an operations review. Some of you corporate folks know what I'm talking about. You roll into this meeting, and you're sharing all your results for the quarter and all your action plans and how you're going to get there and all these data points and things like that. And most of my counterparts are men. So we all march into this meeting with the executive team, right? At this big conference table, we're sharing our story, and all the questions, it's like they all of a sudden wake up when I start talking. All the questions, all the pushback, all the challenges come to me. My results are better. My action plan is solid. I knew what I was talking about, and it all comes at me. And then to make it worse, after the meeting, there's the meeting after the meeting where everybody goes out, kind of the boys club, no offense, men. And everybody goes out. Well, I'm not down with that. I don't go. So then the next day, we're talking strategy, and we're in the meeting again, and all the men are like all chummy and buddy and, hey, man, and all this stuff. And I'm like over at the kiddie table trying to go, hey, wait a minute, how about me? I want to, share some stuff. And people look at me like, oh, Stacey's here. So that's my deal.
Sean, what about you?
Yeah, for me, sometimes there are certain expectations that are set before a person gets to know me. I can remember this one instance. I was working with a company, and a buddy of mine, co-worker, we were locked out of our truck, out of our work vehicle. And so the dude literally has a clothes hanger, and he walks over to me, and he gives me the clothes hanger. Of course, I'm sitting, I'm like, what you want me to do? I don't have anything to hang up. But sometimes there are truly certain expectations that are set, and people expect you to act a certain way because of your background or your ethnicity or whatnot. I just gotta say, I feel like Mountain Lake Church has done an incredible job for me and my family of just taking the time to get to know us. Yeah. It was almost close to a year before people realized I was actually a full-time staff member here at the church. But what I realized is that it gave, you guys were taking the time to get to know me and love me for me and not for what I could do.
Absolutely.
And so, so from me and my family, just want to say thank you to you guys. So.
Yeah, absolutely awesome. Let me finish up with this last question, and just briefly, we'll start with you, Sean. One thing that a person could have done to better understand your perspective that maybe would have made interaction different.
Sometimes, as awkward as it may be, sometimes just simply stopping to ask a question or have conversations. I think a lot of times we're afraid of putting ourselves out there, and just take the time to build that relationship, build that trust with someone, so that you can have a legitimate conversation with them. And it's not just so that it benefits your relationship with them. It'll help you to benefit and be able to lead others and help someone else out.
Awesome. What about you, Stacey? Same question.
Yeah, so I would say treat us with respect, the same as the male, corporate leaders would be treated. Listen and find value in what both parties are bringing. Don't separate it. It's not an us and them by any means. I'm not going to sing "I'm Woman, Hear Me Roar" in a staff meeting. Let's just all learn from each other instead of trying to put each other in boxes.
Yeah, good. Matt?
For me, it's just don't assume things. You've heard the word when you assume things.
Yeah, I've heard that, Matt.
Something happens. I won't say. I know you're sweating. Like,
yeah,
oh my God,
please, Matt, please, just don't go there, Matt.
When you assume things don't go as planned.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way. And like Sean, a conversation is just ask a question. Don't assume because I have conquered it. I've overcome this struggle in my life that is easy. Just ask a question. Hey, Matt, what's that like? Before you're going to say, oh, it's not a big deal. I don't even hear it anymore. And people have told me that. And I'm like, well, are you deaf? Like, can you hear right? Are you paying attention to the words I'm speaking? Like, when people say that, I look at them, I say, really? You can't hear that? Like, I give them a Q-tip. So I say, that might help your problem. But yeah, it's a conversation, and just don't assume things. Just be open about, like, hey, what is that like? What do you go through? How has this impacted your life in the past? And then we move on. Yeah, awesome. We move on. We don't talk about it. We don't think about it. Yeah. That's okay.
Cool.
But, yeah.
Stacey, same to you.
Yeah. So what I learned is that. So here's what I learned is that about 5 years ago we met a man in a Walmart. And he was a man that had a little boy in a motorized wheelchair. And this boy he was medically fragile. He had some challenges. And my little bit older son was with us, and of course he's staring. And I'm like, don't stare, right? And we've got Noah, so I'm on the other side of the coin now. I'm like, don't stare. And this man taught not only my son, but he taught myself as a parent of a child with special needs what it is that we need everybody to do. Because the first thing he did was smile at Nathan. And he said, it's okay. He said, come on over. He said, do you want to meet my son? He said, let me introduce you to him. So this little boy was nonverbal. He didn't talk. But this man proceeded to answer questions and tell Nathan about this little boy. And when Nathan walked away from that interaction, he, number one, knew what he needed to do when he was in that situation again, right? And he also really understood the really important thing is that little boy had more likenesses to him than differences, right? He just happened to be in a chair and he didn't talk. But other than that, he was a little boy. He liked baseball. He liked all kinds of things. As a parent, what I learned is just that. is that I need people to smile. I need people to come up to us and ask questions. When they find out that Noah's a little different, that's okay. Don't stop talking to us. He's still a little boy. He still loves to dance, and don't make those assumptions. He does. He loves to dance. He loves to play sports. He loves to do all of those things. So I think that's the big thing. Smile, come up to us, ask questions. Don't be afraid to talk. And we're happy to answer questions because I think it's that awareness that is going to build, your understanding what our perspective is like.
Absolutely. Again, there's 4 perspectives, a small cross-section of what could be like 100 of us up here. But it's obvious, all 4 very different perspectives and viewpoints on life, but it's obvious all 4 of them have the joy of the Lord. Would you agree with that? I mean, they just overflow with contagious joy. And here's the reason why. I know them. The reason why is not because, they have a soapbox that they get on and talk about their thing, or as well as me. The reason why that they can smile, that they can laugh, that they sit up with great confidence is because they know Jesus as their Lord and Savior, period. What unites all of us up here on stage is Jesus. And that's the beautiful thing about the story of the woman at the well, the disciples and the woman, but Jesus is in the middle and the Messiah over both. And there's a song that was released. It's an old hymn, but that was redone by a guy named Matt Redman. And if you've grown up in church or Sunday school, you remember the old song, When We All Get to Heaven? Matt Redman redid it, and I was made aware about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And it's just been on repeat and listening to it and just the words and the music. And so I began to research this week, When We All Get to Heaven, that old hymn. And you may not know how or why it was written, but it was written by a lady named Eliza Hewitt. She grew up in the 1800s. She was a school teacher and was teaching school, was out of recess one day. Kids were throwing rocks and threw a piece of slate that hit her in the back and caused severe spinal cord damage and sent her into a bed immediately for a long, long time. And so for a long time, she was in bed in constant pain, but began to study literature and poetry and wrote so many beautiful hymns, one of them being When We All Get to Heaven. And so I just wanted to close out our time. I've asked Sean, I was like, hey, can you just sing this song? And so if you grew up in church, it's going to sound real familiar. If not, just let your mind wander a little bit for me. All right, I know you are all like, you got your things you got to do. But I just want you to sit there and let your mind wander and when we as believers, as followers of Jesus, the body of Christ, when we all get to heaven, what it'll be like. Just listen.
One day you'll make everything new, Jesus. One day you'll bind every wound. The former things shall all pass away. No more tears. One day you'll make sense of it all, Jesus. One day every question resolved, every anxious thought left behind, no more fear. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all see Jesus, we'll sing and shout the victory. One day we will see face to face Jesus. Is there a greater vision of grace? In a moment we shall be changed on that day. One day we'll be free, free indeed, my Jesus. One day all the struggle will cease. rejoicing that will be when we all see Jesus. We'll sing and shout the victory. Yes, when we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be when we all see Jesus. We'll sing and shout the victory. One day we will see face to face Jesus. Is there a greater vision of grace? And in a moment we shall be changed. Yes, in a moment we shall be changed. In a moment we shall be changed. Yes, on that day. Come on, every voice, if you know it, sing it out. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be when we all see Jesus. We'll sing and shout the victory. Come on, one more time, sing it. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be when we all see Jesus. We'll sing and shout the victory. Yes, we will sing and shout the victory. This time we sing it. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be when we all see Jesus. We'll sing and shout the victory.